The sky over Arlington was a dull, oppressive gray, pressing down like a lid over a world trying not to breathe. The only sounds were the rhythmic chirps of distant birds and the soft rustling of uniforms in formation. Rows upon rows of white gravestones stood solemn, as if standing at attention. In the center of it all rested a flag-draped casket, framed by soldiers in dress blues, their faces stoic, their grief masked by years of training. Then came the sound. A howl sharp, guttural, desperate. All heads turned as Ranger, a grizzled German shepherd with fur peppered in gray and scars etched along his side, leapt onto the casket. The cry that left his throat didn't sound like mourning. It sounded like warning. His paws scraped against the flag as he circled, growling low, teeth bared not at the mourners, but at the air itself, as if some unseen force lingered. Two handlers rushed forward to restrain him, but he snapped his jaws in their direction, not to bite, but to defend the coffin. From what? No one yet knew. At the back of the crowd, retired Sergeant Ben Holloway felt the chill crawl up his spine. He knew that sound. He'd heard it before in combat when Ranger detected an eyed moments before detonation, when lives had been saved by the growl that preceded chaos. This wasn't grief. It was instinct. Beside Ben stood his wife, Karen, her hand tightening around his arm. "He knows something's wrong," she whispered. Colonel Franklin Mercer, now retired, but still commanding respect with his every move, stepped forward. "Let him be," he said firmly. A ripple of uncertainty passed through the crowd. But when Mercer spoke, you listened. The handlers backed away, and the casket was opened. What followed wasn't shock, it was dread. Inside was not Captain Jacob Harlan, the soldier everyone had come to honor. Instead, a stranger lay still in the uniform. His face was pale, unfamiliar, and unmistakably wrong. Gasps broke through the crowd like a storm. A young recruit dropped to his knees, sobbing. Ranger went quiet, ears flat, then stepped down from the casket and lay beside it. Protective. Defeated. Ben's breath caught in his throat. Something had gone horribly wrong. This wasn't just a funeral. It was a lie. Far beyond the gravestones, in a black SUV parked beneath the trees, a man in a dark coat watched through binoculars. Quinn Wallace, former intelligence officer, current enforcer for secrets never meant to surface. He lifted a phone to his ear. They opened it. He said calmly, "A pause." The dog reacted. And Holloway was there, another pause. "Yes. We'll take care of him." Inside his home that night, Ben Holloway stared into a cup of coffee gone cold. His mind churned, looping the same image, Ranger howling over a stranger's body. Not mourning, exposing. He had seen death. He had buried friends. But this was something else. When Karen entered the room, still in her robe, she didn't ask what he was thinking. She already knew. "You need to see him," she said. "That dog saw something you didn't before sunrise." Ben stood before the kennels where Ranger had been taken. The young handler at the desk looked uneasy. "He won't eat, won't sleep, just stares at the gate." Ben nodded and approached. Ranger saw him and stood immediately. No bark, no wag, just stillness. Ben crouched and looked him in the eyes. "What did you see, boy?" Ranger stepped forward and tapped the ground with his paw. Once, twice, a pause. Ben's blood ran cold. It was a code, a signal from the battlefield. Not safe. Back at the Pentagon, Wallace reviewed surveillance stills and documents. When he reached Ranger's behavioral report, his finger hovered. Highly responsive to deception. It read. He turned to his assistant. "Start monitoring Holloway. And Jensen. If they move. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to, because the truth had started to leak, and they weren't ready to let it out. Ben Holloway didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. The face in the casket haunted him, the absolute certainty that the man buried with full honors wasn't Captain Jacob Harlan. Not his voice, not his walk, not the brother in arms he had fought beside. And Ranger. Ranger had known it before anyone else. When the sun finally rose over Virginia, casting long shadows through the kitchen blinds, Ben was still at the table, eyes red, coffee untouched. Karen stood in the doorway, robe wrapped tightly around her. She didn't ask if he was okay. Instead, she said something that made his blood run cold. "You need to go see Ranger." Ben drove straight to the K-9 facility on the edge of town where Ranger had been taken after the funeral. The officer at the desk looked confused when he arrived. "Sir, the dog hasn't moved, hasn't eaten. He's been staring at the gate since he got here." Ben said nothing, just nodded and walked down the hallway. When Ranger saw him, the dog stood. No bark, no wagging tail, just slow, deliberate steps to the edge of the kennel gate. He pressed his nose to the bars. Ben knelt. "What did you see, old friend?" Ranger didn't make a sound, but then he did something he hadn't done since the war. He sat down and tapped the ground once, twice. A pause. Then again. It wasn't random. It was code. A message Jacob had trained him to give in the field. Not safe. Ben's stomach twisted. Across town, in a windowless federal building with flickering overhead lights, Quinn Wallace reviewed a report marked Arlington Incident. His finger tapped against the desk as he read the names. Holloway, Mercer, Jensen, Harlan. He stopped at the last one. Harlan's status. Deceased disputed. His jaw tightened. He looked across the table at a fellow agent. Put Jensen under quiet surveillance. If he talks, I want to know before his heartbeat registers on radar. As for Holloway, he hesitated. Keep him close, but let him think he's loose. Back at the kennel, Ben walked Ranger behind the facility, away from cameras and prying eyes. As they passed the perimeter fence, Ranger suddenly stopped, nose high, body rigid. Ben followed the dog's line of sight. Tire tracks. Fresh. Civilian, not government. Ben crouched and traced the tread with his fingers. Someone's been here. Ranger barked once. Sharp. Then bolted into the woods. Ben followed, heart hammering, adrenaline roaring to life. They ran until they found it. Half buried under leaves and brush, an old military duffel bag. The zipper had dried blood on it. Inside, a soaked field notebook, a faded ID card with Jacob's photo, but the name scratched out. Eric Hayes, and at the very bottom, a folded photo. Jacob and Ranger, standing together in the desert, eyes proud, smiles real. On the back, one phrase written in smeared ink. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Ben's hands trembled. He turned the page in the notebook. Names. Dozens of them. Each one familiar. Each one tied to a mission he thought he understood. Kyle Jensen. Franklin Mercer. Ben Holloway. Each name was underlined. Some were crossed out. It wasn't a list. It was a ledger. And they were being hunted. As Ben knelt in the woods, the wind picked up and Ranger growled not at the trees, but at something deeper. A memory. A presence. Back in the city, Kyle Jensen sat alone in his apartment, staring at a phone he didn't want to dial. His fingers trembled, but fear gave way to guilt. He called. Ben picked up immediately. "Sergeant," Kyle whispered. We weren't supposed to open the bunker. But Jacob was in there hurt. We thought we were helping him. Then men came. Not ours. They took him. Burned the rest. And now, I think they're watching me. Ben closed his eyes. They're watching all of us. Back at the federal building, Quinn Wallace leaned against the doorframe, listening to the recorded call. A junior agent muttered, "He's cracking." Quinn smiled faintly. Good. Fear makes them talk, and truth makes them stupid. Later that night, Ben sat on his porch. The notebook rested on his lap. Karen stood behind him, arms folded tight. "You're going to follow this, aren't you?" He nodded without looking back. "Because if Jacob's not dead, he's running from something worse." He looked toward the woods, where darkness clung to every tree. "And I need to know what scared him so badly." That death was the safer choice. Rain fell in sheets as Ben Holloway turned into the driveway of Colonel Franklin Mercer's old home. The notebook lay on the passenger seat like it weighed 100 pounds. Something in his gut told him this wasn't just a visit, it was a reckoning. But something was wrong. The front gate, always padlocked, stood open. The flagpole was bare. The front door, ajar. Ben stepped out slowly, one hand near the pistol tucked under his jacket. Rain soaked through his coat as he moved up the steps. The air felt wrong still, thick like a room after someone screamed. Inside, the house was chaos. Drawers ripped open. Papers scattered like feathers after an explosion. Family photos shattered on the floor. But no sign of Mercer. Ben moved through the study, scanning for anything intact, anything overlooked. Then he saw it. A file folder wedged under the leg of an overturned chair. On the tab, Phoenix Echo. The name hit him like a gut punch. Before he could grab it, he heard it a creak from the hallway. Ben turned just in time to see a shadow in the glint of steel. A shot rang out, splintering the frame beside his head. Ben dove through the nearest window. Glass tore across his arms, but he didn't stop. He hit the porch, rolled, and bolted through the storm. Behind him, a black SUV peeled out of the alley, tires screaming through the mud. He didn't look back. By the time he got home, he was soaked, bleeding, and breathless. Karen opened the door, her face pale. "Ben," he dropped the Phoenix Echo file onto the kitchen table. Their cleaning house, inside the folder, was a photo old, grainy, taken during deployment. A squad standing outside a bombed-out structure. Ben, Jacob, and a few others. But beneath Jacob's face was a name Ben didn't recognize. Eric Hayes. Karen stared at the name. "Are you telling me Jacob was living under a false identity?" Ben shook his head. "Not living. Working. Undercover. Deep across town." Kyle Jensen parked across from a nondescript federal building. He watched as Quinn Wallace stepped outside into the rain. Calm. Unshaken. Too calm. Jensen's breath caught. That man had been there after the mission. He'd said nothing but watched everything. He was no paper pusher. He was part of the machine. And Kyle realized in that moment, he wasn't just being watched. He was being followed. That night, back at Ben's, Ranger sat at the door, ears pinned back, growling low. Ben followed his gaze and froze. A figure stood across the street behind a lamppost, still and silent, face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Watching. Karen stepped beside Ben. "They know," she whispered. "They're not hiding anymore." Ben didn't blink. "Good. Because I'm done hiding too." The next morning, he loaded Ranger into the truck and drove out of town, following the only thread he had left: the name Jacob once mentioned in a letter, Sam Whitaker, an old friend from before everything went sideways. Sam lived on a quiet ranch, nestled in hills where cell towers died and secrets grew like weeds. When Ben arrived, Sam didn't flinch. He just looked him in the eyes and said, "Figured you'd come." They didn't waste time on small talk. In the barn, Sam pulled out a dust-covered trunk. "Jacob sent this to me years ago. Told me not to open it unless someone came asking." Ben opened it slowly. Inside were sealed documents, a blood-stained field map, and one letter addressed to him handwritten, rushed, desperate. Ben read it aloud. "If you're reading this, they found you. Phoenix Echo wasn't about enemies. It was about us. They used us, programmed our missions, erased the ones who asked too many questions. I ran not to escape but to leave a trail. Find Evelyn Marks. She knows everything. Trust no one. Not even me." Thunder boomed in the distance. But it wasn't thunder. Ben stepped outside. 2 black SUVs had stopped just beyond the ridge. Quinn Wallace sat inside one, phone to his ear. "They found the trunk," he said. "Do we green light?" On the other end, a voice replied, "End it." Inside the barn, Ranger growled low. Sam grabbed an old shotgun off the wall. "They're not here to scare us," he said. Ben nodded, eyes sharp. "They're here to erase us." The barn door shook under the pressure of approaching danger. Outside, the wind carried the faint crunch of tires on gravel, slow, steady, deliberate. 2 black SUVs rolled up, headlights off, like predators moving in silence. Inside, Ben Holloway gripped the shotgun tight, his pulse steady but fierce. Beside him, Ranger stood alert, injured, but refusing to back down. Sam loaded shells into a rusted revolver. "We use the ravine out back," Ben said quietly. "We lead them away from the house." "We buy time for what?" Sam asked. Ben held up the small flash drive Jacob's letter had led them to. To finish what Jacob started, as the agents surrounded the barn, Ben and Sam slipped out the back, ducking through tall grass toward the tree line. Ranger followed, limping but determined. Then gunfire. Wood exploded behind them. They ran faster, diving behind a boulder just as a bullet zipped past Ben's ear. "They're not here to question us," Sam growled, reloading. "They're here to bury us." Ben didn't answer. He already knew. Suddenly, Ranger broke away, teeth bared, launching toward one of the shadows flanking them. The man had no time to react. Ranger collided with him mid-stride, sending both crashing to the dirt. Another agent emerged, this one faster. Ben turned, fired. The blast echoed through the ravine. Silence. 2 bodies lay still. Ben turned to Sam. "Take the truck. Go to Karen. Tell her everything. Tell her." "I'll come when I can." Sam hesitated, eyes locked with his. "You sure?" Ben nodded. "They'll follow me." "That's what I want." Sam ran. The sound of his tires faded into the distance. Ben turned back toward the ridge, just in time to see the 3rd SUV crest the hill. He raised his shotgun, but stopped when he saw who stepped out. Quinn Wallace. Unarmed. Calm. Like always. "You know it's over," Quinn called out. "Not yet," Ben replied. "Not until the truth is out. You're limping. You're bleeding. That dog can barely stand. Then you better hope we fall fast behind Quinn." More agents began spreading out, but slowly. Calculating. They were waiting. Ben grabbed Ranger by the collar. "Come on, buddy." One more push. They made it to the truck Sam had left behind. Inside was everything Ben needed: the flash drive, a map, and a single destination circled in red, an old emergency broadcasting tower 6 miles north. By nightfall, they reached it. The place was ancient rusted metal, cables like spiderwebs. But the satellite uplink still blinked alive when Ben plugged in the drive. He watched the upload bar crawl, 12%, 23%, 41%. Then voices. Footsteps. They were here. Ben crouched behind the transmitter, reloading with trembling hands. Ranger stood beside him, his breathing ragged. No matter what, Ben whispered, this truth gets out. The first agent appeared through the trees. Ben fired a warning shot. Back off. Another emerged, then another. Gunfire erupted. Ben returned fire, ducking behind a broken console. The upload climbed 74, 82%, 89%. Then a flashbang exploded. Ben was thrown backward, ears ringing. Through the haze, he heard it, a growl, a snarl, a scream. Then, silence. He crawled back to the screen. 96%, 98%, 100%. Upload complete. The truth had been sent. Behind him, Ranger collapsed bleeding, still. Ben reached for him, pulled him close. You did it, he whispered. You saved them. A new figure approached. Ben raised his gun, but it wasn't an agent. It was Quinn Wallace. No weapon in his hand, just eyes filled with something. You think they'll believe it? Quinn asked. Ben didn't flinch. They don't have to. They just have to see it. Quinn stared at Ranger, then at Ben. They'll come for you. I'm counting on it. Weeks later, headlines blazed. Whistleblower exposes secret military program, dozens of deaths linked. Congress demands inquiry into Phoenix Echo. Karen sat on her porch, clutching Ranger's collar. Tears streamed silently as the news anchor spoke Jacob Harlan's name. The phone rang. A voice on the other end said only, he made it, then hung up. Ben Holloway vanished after that. No photos. No statements. Only one envelope appeared at a veterans center days later. Inside, an old photo of Jacob and Ranger in the desert, smiling. On the back, 5 words written in Ben's hand. We were never just soldiers.